Hey guys, what's up? What's happening? Thanks for tuning back in. This is like the 6th time I've tried to record this. The recent purchase of a Blue Yeti has not done anything to help my recording days because it for some reason keeps disconnecting and it's getting really annoying. So I'm back to the old headset mic. So I mean, if you guys have been following me the last couple of weeks or even listened to some of our recent podcasts, the mic seems to be working fine actually. What is scary about a mic not working is that I could face a dilemma where I'm interviewing a potential person on the podcast, and then that mic cuts out. I try to do these things in kind of one shoot, so I've got to change mics and I've got to kind of hash the interview, and I feel like sometimes if you have to redo the interview, you lose the kind of initial flow or stream or advantage you had at the first time when you ask them these questions. I feel like asking the same questions over and over again, it can get really repetitive. So yeah, I think I'm probably going to have to invest in a new mic at one point again, which really annoys me because I spent good money on getting that mic, even second hand, and yeah, it's basically not working properly. So yeah, I'm probably going to have to replace it. Anyway. So you're probably wondering what this episode is or what I'm doing here. So this whole section is called Thinking Out Loud, and it comes from listening to a fellow YouTuber and a fellow artist, Ahmed Aldoori. If you listened a couple of weeks ago, you would know that Ahmed was a guest on the podcast, and we talked about various things. Also, if anybody was listening and listened to the fact that I was supposed to be going to Japan, that fell through, so that is no longer happening. So I'm on kind of plan B just now, but I'm working, I'm doing freelance bits here and there from different people. Still haven't landed that studio job, but I've been told that the average time between graduation and your first gig in the game industry is about 2 years. So that's just a little bit more disheartening because I'm older. I'm a lot older. In fact, as I'm recording this, it depends when I'm going to put this out. It might even go out on the same day, but tomorrow, the 22nd of August, it will be my birthday, and I'll be 34 years young. So it's a momentous day. I'm really chuffed that I'm getting older because it's always a great thing to get older, but at the same time, it comes with its own worries. And this is kind of why I'm making this episode, why I'm talking about this stuff, because listen to Ahmed's podcast, or Med, I should call him. I'll call him Med from now on because he prefers that. Med Petty's podcast, the Medcast, I'll link it below. And he talked about a lot of his own fears and upsets and things that were going on in his life that were kind of causing him stress. And he also brought up a really solid point about negativity on the internet and being kind of beholden to that or at the mercy of that, and it made me just want to make this episode because early on in the podcast career, you guys might not know because it goes a couple of years back, but my first couple of attempts at this before I got really official and I started doing episodes with Colin Cyril, it was just me talking. But at the time, I was so young in the industry and I didn't really know enough to where, I was sitting saying to myself, why would people listen to me? Why would anybody want to take in the information I'm talking about? Because, I don't have a lot of experience. But now, I've not got that industry job yet, but I've spoken to enough industry people that I feel like, I've got a decent handle in the industry. I could talk solidly about it. So, yeah, I wanted to make this episode all about negativity. So, when I look back at my career, because I think I kind of hit an epiphany at one point, either today or yesterday, where I look back at my early career on YouTube and things I was doing before I became an artist. So I used to run multiple eventually, but one initially YouTube channel. I don't really want to say the name because the videos are so terrible, but that's not the point. What I'm talking about is that I ran a games channel years and years ago on YouTube. A lot of the videos are still up. You could probably find them, but when I made those, they were very unprofessional. Now, I say unprofessional. I say unprofessional in regards to I didn't have any solid recording equipment. I didn't have any, I say fancy titles. I had I had an iMac is what I had. I had one iMac, and this was an old school iMac. It was the 21.5-inch iMac from like 2004, 2005 or something like that. So I had one iMac, that's all I had. And I used the webcam in that to record me talking about video games. I think my first ever video that I done was The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, because that game is like, The Legend of Zelda is my favourite series to begin with. You probably heard me and Ahmed talk about this, but that game for me is like one of the finest game series ever created, especially Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild for me is like not only the best Zelda game ever created, it is one of the best video games ever created, which you can look on the scores and see that, it got 10 out of 10 perfect scores from like nearly 40 outlets, because it is probably the adult version of Zelda we all wanted. The fact that, especially there was no Navi, right? Navi basically died, never came back, and there was no guide. You were just set into the world. Here's a mini map. Here's a couple of swords and bits and pieces. Go, and you were just thrust out into adventure, and I loved that. So, video games aside, and I'm deviating. I might even do a section at one point in this podcast about video games, but that's probably going to dilute it. Anyway, I done those videos, and I didn't really care at the time because YouTube was still really small, right? This is in like the beginning days of YouTube, because I think I first launched my first video in like 2008, I'm going to say, roughly. So back in those days, like YouTube was in its infancy. Like it was just, like PewDiePie and Jenna Marbles and all those big channels that are huge now. They were like just getting started. They were making their first content. And it's similar to what PewDiePie talked about. It's what I'm going to talk about, is that when I made those videos, I made videos for a long time before I got anybody to notice what I was doing. Long story short, those videos eventually got me a job working in games media, and I got to go to events and I got to talk to developers and interview them. There's still a couple of interviews I've done, locally. They're up on that website. I interviewed one of the main PR guys and guys that were involved in the first Batman Arkham Asylum. When Wii Sports was just a thing, I got to talk to some guys from Nintendo. I got to talk to some guys from the PlayStation Eye camera game, the pet thing. It was a couple of guys at an event I went to, but that lasted for a while, and I got to do reviews, blah blah. So there was a lot there that opportunity came from, and I wasn't making those game videos to, please anybody but myself. Like, I made them because I wanted to make them. I was like, I'm going to make game videos because I love video games and I want to talk about them. I don't care if there's one person listening or 100 people listening. I just want to make them, and I put my heart and soul into them. Like, the more I done, the more I would like add titles, and I would add music and videos and start making funny jokes and things at the start of the video. Even wrote my own theme song and recorded it on like GarageBand, but it was like the best thing ever. And people always talk about how Steve Jobs kickstarted the creative career. That iMac was my beginning in what would be the entertainment industry, and eventually, yeah, I even auditioned for IGN. I wanted to go and work as a games media consultant with them, which never really happened. I think at that time that was the competition where Keza McDonald went to write for them. I think either that or she did get hired legitimately, but it was around that time. And yeah, so I done all that off my own back. And, you would occasionally get negative comments, or people would put stuff on about, your stuff's terrible or blah, 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 or something to do with my weight and whatever. But then, at the time, I was just so driven by being passionate about what I loved and doing what I loved that I didn't really give a, I didn't really give a about what people were going to say to me. Like, seriously, fuck all those people. Like, they could seriously go suck a dick. Like, anyway, so basically what I wanted to say was that, I didn't care back then. I didn't care who was watching or who was saying I was good or not. I just loved what I was doing. I just loved talking about video games. It was a huge passion I had. I've always had a passion for games and entertainment media in general. And, I just made more and more content. I made more episodes. I went from releasing like one video a month to like one every week. Then every couple of days I'd maybe do an update or some gaming news stuff. There was a ton of stuff I'd done. And then as I grew older, because that was around the time or closer to the time when I was thinking about changing careers, and then eventually I left my job in 2012. The internet started to take its toll on me. The more and more I dived into the machine of the internet and done things like, looked up really bad news stories about the world or conspiracy theories or what was going on with the presidency and blah, 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 blah. It just sunk me into this deeper and deeper dark hole. And then obviously as my channel grew, I think I got to like a couple of hundred subs. The pressure I put on myself mounted because then I was like, well, there's more people watching now, so I need to make my stuff better and more professional. I need to do new titles, and I think it was like when Ahmed talked in his podcast, he was like, initially I just sat down and talked, but then I was like, I need to make sure my stuff's, my content's really good and I've got something, relevant to talk about and I need to have it structured. And then the more pressure he put on himself, the less he wanted to do it right. So what does this all boil down to? Well, this all boils down to my career so far in the games industry. When I've started taking it seriously, I would guess would be the proper term, when I went to university in 2015, that's when I started, really thinking about what I want to do and how I need to start making connections. And by the time I had finished in the summer of 2016, my second year, because I went into second year first, I skipped a year. So when I went into second year and I finished that and I was going into third year, that summer was my first summer I went to industry workshops, 2016, and I met a lot of industry people. That was a monumental shift in my career because even up till then I had been kind of drawn for fun in myself, not really giving a shit about what people thought of my stuff. But then I was like, oh man, going to these talks with, Marek Madje and Titus Lunter and Mike Hill, I was like, my stuff needs to be this good, it needs to be this realistic, it needs to be this standard. And yeah, I just put a ton of pressure on myself to be like, you need to be this good, and you need to be this good really quickly. And then just listening to those negative voices over and over again, and it was really hard because I totally understand that it's people can say you can block out the negativity and be positive all the time, but for me, I was so sensitive and have been sensitive all my life. I'm just really quite empathetic to people a lot of the time. So if somebody cries, I feel really sad. If somebody throws up, I nearly throw up. I can like almost feel people's energy. As kind of hippy dippy as that sounds, but I seriously I can feel like if there's a negative or really tense vibe in the room, like I just totally, it eats me up. If there's a huge tension in the room, if someone's really angry, I kind of sit and I'm like, oh shit, oh, fuck. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Whereas most people would maybe be like, or well, most people who don't concern themselves with that stuff would be like, whatever, and who gives, who cares, and just let it, pass over me. I don't really care. But I do, like, that stuff really eats at me. But then that's just, it was the same with YouTube, right? YouTube was getting to a point where there was so much negativity on stuff I was doing that I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And that's why I stopped a lot of my gaming stuff, because people were, stupid stuff like they were calling me fat and they were calling me, or didn't know what I was talking about, or they would correct me and stuff. And just loads and loads of comments that were really negative. And then eventually, rather than pushing through that and making more content, I just shut down and I was like, oh well, like this, I'm not going to make any more stuff. I'm just going to come off the internet and not do anything. And then that was kind of the same with my art stuff. I was so, at that time, because I had been going to so many talks and talking to so many professionals, and I saw all the amazing work, I was like, I'm never going to be this good. And every time I'd done something, I was like, that's terrible. And then if people would even just slightly reinforce that, saying, no, that's terrible, then that would just eat me alive, and I wouldn't be able to make anything, and the voices would win. I remember a absolutely specific example where I done one of my first ever photo bash pictures. If I can find it, I'll try and put it up on the podcast. If I found that photo, you're looking at it now. So I'd done this picture, and at the time I thought, when I finished it, I was like, that's pretty good. Now, that's something I really say about my work, but at the time I was like, that's no bad. That's no great, but for a first attempt, and this is the first time I'd ever done anything like this, I was like, that's pretty good. That's a decent attempt. And then The people I was in university with at the time got wind of the picture when I posted it, and they were like, "Oh, this is really cool. Did you paint it yourself?" And I tried to explain to them, "Well, no, this is a technique called photo passion." And then, like, a lot of people kind of descended on me and said, "Oh, dude, you should really paint things yourself. That's totally cheating. That's totally not how drawing or painting works. You didn't draw any of this. This is all just photographs. This is terrible. This is trash. Blah 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 blah." So eventually, I was like, "Oh well, fuck it," and I didn't believe that one. But I was like, I'll do the re-edit. Oh, okay. So I mean, I was like, yeah, like I'll just take it down. Obviously, it's terrible. Blah, blah. And then, it took a couple of people coaxing me for like a week or two to be like, dude, that painting was really good. You should put it back up. And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, I don't know if it's legitimately going to be good because like these people said this thing, and they're like, dude, absolutely. Those people, like, they have no idea what you're trying to accomplish. They have no idea about what a production value painting's like and what actually working within a studio is like, and the quality you have to deliver so quickly. So photo bashing is a totally legitimate technique. For years and years and years, I saw professional artists like struggle with that immensely, either using reference or using 3D models for their paintings. Like, they were absolutely hounded. Like, one person I know, particularly Suzanne Helmig, like, who is an amazing artist, so talented. I've been following her forever. When she put out a kind of step by step of this painting she drew, I think it was a skeleton lying down holding a sword, but she posed an actual skeleton in 3D and took a snapshot and then painted over that, and people like ripped into her so hard. They were like, "You can't use 3D for this. It's not even properly done because you're using 3D as a crutch. Oh, you're a terrible artist because you're using reference." I was like, "Oh my god!" And this was someone who'd been working in the industry for years. And I was like, well, I stand no chance because, like, if I have to do that, people are just going to kill me. So the whole gist of this is that, you know, I think now I'm starting to come around to the idea of, like, absolutely, categorically, everybody. And, the stuff I will make is for me and me fucking alone. And, if studios want to hire me because of the stuff I make, fantastic. But I just want to make stuff that I love. And I want to do things I love. And I want to go back to just loving art and having a good time doing it. Because, oh my God, me, so many times I've made things and I've been like, well, this person's not going to like this, and then they're going to talk about this, and I talk myself into a grave. Like, I talk myself into just almost deleting and just throwing stuff in the bin or deleting. It's like somebody which I used to hate, but I ended up doing it myself, where people would, draw really amazing stuff in their sketchbook, and then all of a sudden you'd be looking through their sketchbook going, where was that really awesome thing you drew? And they're like, oh, that, or I tore it out of my book and threw it in the trash. And I'm like, dude, what the actual, like, why would you throw that stuff in the trash? It was so good. And, people just have this whole thing set up in their head that, especially sketchbooks, right? Sketchbooks are supposed to be places where you fail and fail hard. And then when you go to, like, Photoshop, obviously you do the good stuff then. But, I see people being so, especially students, being so precious with their sketchbooks. And yeah, it's difficult because, with ArtStation, with social media, with a lot of these forums, there's so many people that are afraid to post stuff now because they're so afraid of people giving them negative comments. I mean, this was a whole talking point, I think only a week or two ago, when on the 10,000 Hours forum on Facebook, Justin Fields, who started 10,000 Hours on his lunch break, this was a thing he just started by hobby. He started 10,000 Hours with the intent of professionals being able, or people who were artists, posting stuff up and getting feedback, genuine, feedback. But then recently, someone posted I forget, I think it was an Iron Man or a Captain America 3D model, like a ZBrush model, and like 100%, it was somebody who was beginning, who had just started using it. Sure, it wasn't like, an amazing AAA level sculpt, but like, the proportions were there. You had a head, you had arms, you had hands, and rather than critique it properly or give genuine feedback, there was a lot of people who had put like a laughing emoji, and there's a lot of controversy about like, or because we put a laughing emoji, we're like criminals now. So to those people, I've got to say this: you, because if you're going to laugh at somebody like that, like why even be on 10,000 hours? And people were actually fighting with Justin, the guy who invented it, and telling him that like, oh, he's being like, this is too extreme, and how can you judge us on a laughing emoji? We weren't being harsh. But there were also people putting really harsh comments, like the stuff was terrible. Um, and yeah, like the guy at the time, I think it was Max, or I can't remember the guy's name, but he, obviously has posted since, and good on him. He's not afraid now to keep posting stuff. But you know what, man, the internet is just full of some of the worst type of people. Sometimes it makes just. I've seen people who I know who are even, this is just like going back to video games. I've seen people who are like genuinely super nice people. I mean, I've done it on occasion, but like I'm not talking to the levels I've seen some people. Like I've said to people, "Oh, you're an asshole," or "Go away," blah blah. But I've seen some people play some like competitive shooters like Overwatch or Rainbow Six Siege, and just be like absolutely unbelievably toxic to people. And I think those things, inherently because they're competitive, but also because they're shooters, so they're quite violent. So yeah, they do bring out sometimes the worst in people. There was an article actually about how Trump had talked about recently where um, violent video games cause violence, which I totally disagree with. That there is no founded merit on that whatsoever. Um, Also, yeah, I've played video games all my life. It's never made me violent. But then there was a counter article where somebody had said, violent video games don't make people violent, but it does encourage hate. So that I kind of agree with, because you know yourself, you've been playing a game like League or Dota or Overwatch or Siege or Counter Strike or a lot of those different types of games, and a lot of the younger audiences are people who play those games who don't really have a lot of worldly experience. Well, mostly because adults don't have time to play those types of games. Of course, I still do. What does that say about you, Gordon? Anyway, but yeah, they can be really, really toxic and use really offensive language and say things, like the N word and a lot of different things where, I mean, PewDiePie's done it in the past, and I think it's just you feel sometimes like you're invulnerable behind your keyboard, and you'll have no repercussions for what you say. So it encourages people just to be hateful all the time. And a lot of these kids who will go on these games and talk about hateful speech or say hateful things are usually people who are victims of hate speech themselves, who have been, bullied at school or picked on for being geeky. So when they get home, they rant on other people to try and feel better, which is basically bullying, because when you look at it, bullies generally are bullies because they are facing some type of hardship themselves. They're getting beat at home. They've got step parents maybe who, and I'm not saying all step parents are bad. Of course I'm not. I'm just saying, I have seen cases where people have been raised by other dads or mums, and there's been a lot of violence in the home. So then they project that violence on other people. That's why they beat people up at school. So, this is a bigger can of worms that we can get in like half an hour. But what I'm saying basically is that there's a lot of toxicity on the internet. And I think the less you expose yourself to that stuff and the more you just try and stay above it, the more chance you've got of making awesome stuff with your art. Because I think for art to flow from a good place, you need to be in a good place. And I obviously know there are people who draw from a lot of negative energy to make art and make really awesome art. That's totally valid. But also, I think, for a lot of people, if you seep into that negative mindset, or that negative way of thinking, then it can, in essence, discourage you from doing really great things. Which is where I think, like I said, a lot of my stuff has probably went wrong or has been difficult because, like I said, back when I first started my first gaming channel, I didn't care what people thought of me. I didn't care who saw my stuff. I just cared that I made it and put it out there, and I was proud of it. It was the same with Twitch, right? Because I tried to stream like hardcore on Twitch when it first came online, I think 2012, 13. And I was like, no one of the first people on there, but like maybe within the first year of it launching as Twitch, like the gaming thing, I was on it and I was trying to stream constantly. And, use it as a platform maybe to make some money or, do something creative on it. And yeah, within, I think, 6 months, I had basically left it because there were so many people, like, in real time, being absolute dicks to me, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't put up with it. It was really depressing. It was making me horribly sad. It was making me feel crap about myself. So yeah, I eventually left Twitch because it was just too painful to be in there anymore. So yeah, the internet's toxic. My takeaway from this is that I need to try and be in it less and focus more on work. 100%. I've ranted for a bit, guys, but I just wanted to test this out and see what you thought, and give a little feel out to think, what you think of these episodes. If you want me to do more of this kind of stuff, but if you have any comments, please leave them down below. Please let me know what you think. And as always, I love all you guys. Stay positive. If you want me to critique anything or look at any of your work, just leave it down below. I'll help as much as I can. And with that, yeah, see you later, guys. Love you all. Bye.